Senator McGrath. We'll now move to question time, and I'll call Senator Hume.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam President. My question is to the Minister representing the Treasurer, Senator Gallagher. Households are facing higher interest rates for longer because Labor has failed to tackle homegrown inflation. Last week, the Treasurer blamed the RBA for smashing the economy. Why is the Treasurer obsessed with fighting everything and everyone except for inflation?
Good question.
Thank you, Senator Hume. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, President. Well, there were so many factual things wrong in that question. I don't really know how to approach it. But I am proud to work with the Treasurer, who, from day one, when we inherited an inflation challenge with a 6 in front of it, remember that? The highest quarterly growth in inflation was under the last quarter of your government. To work with a Treasurer whose 100% focus has been on making the right economic decisions for the Australian people from day one. And as the national accounts show, the decisions that we took and have taken over the last 2 years to get the budget in better shape, to deliver 2 surpluses, something that those opposite were unable to do in a decade, to find savings, to lower the debt, the Commonwealth's debt, to lower the interest on that debt, to provide cost of living relief where we can without adding to the inflation challenge, and to put in place investments that support future economic growth have been the right ones for this economy, and they were clearly shown in the national accounts, where those opposite have already announced $315 billion in cuts that they would like to make to public spending, where if those opposite were in power, based on the decisions that they've made clear to the Australian people, this economy would be in recession. Now, they might want that for political purposes, but we have taken decisions based on the right decisions for the right time. Our economy continues to grow. That growth is weak. We are supporting that growth with appropriate investments across the economy, and we will continue to do so.
Senator Hume, first supplementary.
Last week, the former Treasurer, the Treasurer's former boss, and the Labor Party National President Wayne Swan told the Today Show that he was very disappointed in the Reserve Bank and it was punching itself in the face. Do you agree with this assessment, Minister? And does the Treasurer think that this kind of language is an appropriate way to speak about the independent body, the Reserve Bank? And has the Secretary of the Treasury raised this language with the Treasurer?
Thank you, Senator Hume. Minister Gallagher.
Oh, well, there's a lot in that too. I use my own language when I describe the economy and some of the challenge that we're seeing in the economy. I use my own language, and indeed I have used very similar language to that the Treasurer used. Very similar language. Obviously, those opposite have been asleep because it's like they first heard this last week when it appeared on the front page of a daily paper. I use my own language. It is no secret that growth is weak because interest rates have been lifted. That is the effect. That is factual. That is a point of fact. We have similar objectives to the Reserve Bank, different jobs to do, similar objectives, getting inflation back. But our job is to also support households during this time, which is why we've got our cost of living relief, which you opposite, those opposite, have opposed.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Hume, second supplementary.
Thank you, Madam President. Minister, why does the Labor Party think it's acceptable to blame shift onto the independent RBA in this way when all they're doing is clearing up after your economic mess? Is this the kind of aggressive language really appropriate for senior representatives of Labor?
Thank you, Senator Hume. Minister Gallagher.
Well, I don't believe the Reserve Bank puts it in the way that you have just put it there. In fact, the Reserve Bank has acknowledged that the decisions that we are taking, such as delivering a surplus, are actually helpful at this time. 2 surpluses delivered, savings found, lower debt, making appropriate cost of living investments where we need to. We work hand in hand with the Reserve Bank. They have their job to do, but it is no secret, there is no secret that higher interest rates are having an effect on household consumption, and that's been reflected in the national accounts. For a treasurer or a finance minister to make that point of fact is not unusual. Now, inflation is moderating in welcome ways. Again, I remind those opposite who are so shocked about it now, you must have been absolutely terrified when it had a 6 in front of it under your watch.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Walsh.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister for Finance, Senator Gallagher. Last week's national accounts confirmed what we know, that consumption is low and households are under pressure. It also confirmed that the Albanese Labor government's economic plan to fight inflation whilst providing cost-of-living relief is the right one for the times, one which supports growth in the economy. Can the minister outline how our responsible and balanced approach is helping Australians doing it tough, and what additional cost-of-living relief is rolling out in September to further assist households?
Thank you, Senator Walsh. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you very much, President. I thank Senator Walsh for that question and for her assessment of the national accounts. The national accounts show the challenges facing the economy. They also support the Albanese government's balanced plan to fight inflation while helping those who are doing it tough. The accounts confirm the impact of global economic uncertainty, higher interest rates and persistent but moderating inflation on the Australian economy in the June quarter. The data shows Australians are continuing to limit their spending, with household spending under pressure. This clearly demonstrates why the approach we took in the budget was the right one in response to these difficult conditions. It gives us more confidence in the economic judgments we've made, but we're not complacent about the soft landing that we are working towards. Critical to that approach is the government's rolling out more cost-of-living relief, as Senator Walsh outlined in her question, for Australians through September, providing more money to help pay the rent, more help for people on payments and cheaper medicines for more Australians. From September, the maximum rate of Commonwealth rent assistance will increase by a further 10%. We're finalising the rollout of 60-day dispensing, with additional medicines being made available, bringing the total to almost 300. We're extending the higher rate of job seeker to single recipients who have an assessed partial capacity to work less than 15 hours per week, delivering at least an additional $54.90 a fortnight. Payments are being indexed for people on job seeker, the age pension, disability support pension, carer payment and parenting payment, on top of the Commonwealth rent assistance increase. This is on top of new data that shows Australians have saved more than $500 million since the Albanese government introduced cheaper medicines. We know that there's more to do in the fight against inflation, and we acknowledge that, and that's why we're rolling out more responsible cost-of-living relief from September, whilst at the same time turning big Liberal deficits into Labor surplus.
Senator Walsh, first supplementary.
It's clear that the Albanese government's balanced and responsible approach to the budget is delivering support for Australians while ensuring the economy is resilient enough to weather the challenges we're facing. Can the minister outline the other ways this approach is benefiting Australians and supporting our economy, such as creating almost 1 million jobs, delivering the first surplus in 15 years, in fact back-to-back surpluses, record women's workforce participation and the fastest wage growth since 2009?
Thank you, Senator Walsh. The time for asking has expired. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you very much. I thank Senator Walsh for the supplementary. Well, employment is up from 13.5 million to 14.5 million May 2022 versus July 2024. Participation rate is at a record high of 67.1%, up from 66.3%. The gender pay gap is down to a record low of 11.5% from 14.2%. Full-time employment for women is up from 3.6 million to 3.9 million. Manufacturing jobs have risen from 834,600 to 905,700. Long-term unemployment has dropped. Industrial disputes have fallen sharply. Annual wage growth is up. Wholesale electricity prices have halved. Gas prices have dropped. Private business investment is up. Small businesses have grown. We've turned a $78 billion deficit into a $22.1 billion surplus, and we've got another one to come.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Walsh, second supplementary.
The Albanese government has delivered a range of supports, from cheaper medicines, energy bill relief to tax cuts for every Australian taxpayer. We know that these measures are directly helping Australians manage the cost of living challenge. Can the minister explain how the economy would have responded had these government supports and essential services not been in place?
Minister Gallagher.
Thank you very much, President. Well, while we're delivering relief to help with those costs of living, the Leader of the Opposition and his colleagues are planning cuts to essential jobs and services. The Opposition is planning huge cuts to housing during a housing shortage and won't come clean on hundreds of billions of dollars of secret cuts to come. In the third year of a three-year term, the Coalition has no costed or credible economic policies, just a plan to savage and indiscriminate cuts. Cuts don't solve a housing shortage, President. They don't get power prices down and they don't strengthen Medicare. We think it's time for the Opposition to come clear on what all those cuts will be and where they will come from. Because we know, based on the voting record of those opposite, the Coalition want higher power prices, higher grocery prices, higher housing prices and higher taxes, lower wages and now $315 billion in secret cuts.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Minister. Just a moment, Senator Canavan. I'm just going to acknowledge visitors in the gallery. So I draw to the attention of honourable senators the presence in the gallery of a delegation of senior officials from the Federal National Council of the United Arab Emirates, led by the Secretary-General, His Excellency Dr Omar Al-Nuaimi, as a part of a study visit program. On behalf of all senators, I wish you a warm welcome to Australia and in particular to the Senate. Senator Canavan.
Thank you, Madam President. My question is to the Minister representing the Treasurer, Senator Gallagher. Last week's national accounts showed that we are in an entrenched household recession, with productivity going backwards and only anaemic growth at best. To use the Treasurer's own words, who is responsible for smashing the economy, the government or the RBA?
Thank you, Senator Canavan. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you very much, President. The national accounts showed that growth across the Australian economy is slow, it's weak, it's soft, and we are facing similar economic challenges to those being experienced around the world. Well, I think that has been acknowledged by everyone other than those opposite, that there are significant global challenges that have been presented across the world, and in fact in many of the OECD countries have seen at least a negative quarter of growth. Australia has been fortunate in that we have not seen that, but we acknowledge that the impact of those global pressures, the challenges, price pressures and higher interest rates are having an effect on growth in our economy. And so the government takes responsibility for an economic plan that is focused on ensuring that inflation continues to moderate, but that we are helping households out while they're doing it tough. And that's why our cost of living approach, our budget management approach, where we've found savings, where we've delivered surpluses, all helps in the inflation challenge. But we're not pretending that people aren't doing it tough, which is why all of those cost of living measures, many of which those opposite opposed, whether it be energy bill rebates, whether it be the tax cuts that they wanted to fight an election over, whether it be our investments in early education and care, whether it be our housing agenda, all opposed by those opposite. These are the decisions we've taken, and I believe the national accounts showed that those decisions were made in the right interests of the economy, that we have managed to continue to grow, albeit slowly, and that the government decisions have supported growth in the economy at an important time.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Canavan, first supplementary.
Thank you. Minister, how much has the nation's productivity fallen under your government?
Thank you, Senator Canavan. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, and I acknowledge Senator Canavan's interest in productivity, because presumably he was really interested when they were in government and over that decade when it was the worst productivity growth that we'd been seen in 40 years. 40 years. 40 years. I'm just drawing your attention, Senator Birmingham, to the fact that you didn't really seem to care about productivity that much when you were in government, but now, all right, accepting that you now do. That is why our housing investments are important. That's why our investments in skills are important. That's why our investments in renewable energy and the green transition are important. And that's why our investments in the care economy are important, all significant drivers of productivity in the economy.
Please resume your seat. Senator Birmingham.
Thanks, President. Well, the minister has had 48 seconds and she's got 12 seconds left on the clock to answer the only question, Senator Canavan asked, which is for the statistic. How much has productivity fallen under the Labor government?
Senator Birmingham, you can't just stand up and launch into a very short statement. You need to let me know if it's a point of order. I'm assuming it was. I believe the minister is being relevant and I will continue to listen carefully. Minister.
Sore point for Senator Birmingham that they were in charge when Australia had the worst productivity outcomes in 4 decades, and why they stood in front of any measure that we put in place to secure economic growth going forward.
Senator Canavan, second supplementary.
Thank you, Madam President. Well, despite the minister's protest, it is much, much worse. Now I have the figure. The figure's fallen by 6.3% in just 2 years. That's productivity growth down by 6.3%. And now our private sector is retreating. How does the government expect the economy to grow sustainably without productivity improving? Or is your economic plan simply a Ponzi scheme based on never-ending growth in government spending and subsidies?
Thank you, Senator Canavan. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you. Well, I would hope then, based on that question, that Senator Canavan will get in and support the government's measures that we've put in place to improve productivity after inheriting the worst growth in productivity in 4 decades. More housing, boosting renewables, investing in skills, grabbing hold of the technology and opportunities that come with that, human capital, perhaps any of that interests you, Senator Canavan, any of that you might like to get behind. All of those are about securing the future growth of our economy and seizing the opportunities that come with it. And where do those opposite want to go? Back to the 1950s, I reckon. That's where they're going. We're looking forward in all of those areas. Senator Canavan, if there's one area in that list, in that long list I read out, that you might like to support, we would welcome that.
Senator Waters.
Thanks very much, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Prime Minister, Minister Wong. The funding announced after Friday's National Cabinet meeting for frontline family, domestic and sexual violence services is still only 78% of the $1 billion each year that the women's safety sector needs to help everyone who asks. This underfunding will still leave 1 in 4 people at risk of being turned away when they reach out for help to flee violence. Nuclear submarines get $368 billion over a decade. Property investors get $159 billion over a decade. Fossil fuels get $11 billion each year. Why are 1 in 4 women being denied the support that full federal funding of frontline services could deliver?
Minister Wong.
Thank you, President. Well, we all want violence against women and children to stop, and certainly I can speak for the Labor government, and I would hope everyone in this chamber that we won't be satisfied until it does. I would say to you, Senator, this was an historic agreement between the federal government and all states and territories at National Cabinet, a new $4.7 billion package for gender-based violence and for frontline legal services. There are a number of other facts in your assertion, which are the Greens' constant refrain around tax measures, which I don't accept those figures, and I don't accept the figures that you put. I know that's part of your political campaign, but I don't accept the figures. But what I would say is that we have seen the Prime Minister, ably assisted by Minister Gallagher, Minister Rishworth, the Attorney-General and many others, put together a package which deals with the funding needs and the needs that have been identified by so many across the community for this National Cabinet. The focus is on action to support the critical work of frontline services. Focus also on targeting perpetrators to stop violence from escalating, on breaking the cycle of violence with a stronger focus on children and young people who have experienced violence and legal support associated with women's safety. This is on top of, and I will just make this point to the chamber, the already record funding that the Commonwealth has committed for women's safety. The government has been working on this since we were first elected. Friday's actions are another step to accelerate change, but they will not be our last.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Waters, first supplementary.
Thanks, President. First Nations women are 33 times more likely to be hospitalised as a result of family, domestic and sexual violence, yet the only new money for First Nations women from Friday is through family violence prevention legal services. We need non-legal frontline services funded as well. Will the government commit to funding culturally safe First Nations community-led wraparound services?
Thank you, Senator Waters. Minister Wong.
Thank you, and I thank the senator for raising this very important issue. And I have some information here which I will add to if I'm able to, or if it's required. I understand that the National Cabinet committed to a significant funding boost to family violence prevention legal services to help them meet growing demand and assist more First Nations women and children. There is also a focus on First Nations children and young people in our $80 million boost to healing and recovery services, and that there is work underway in partnership with First Nations communities to develop the standalone First Nations National Plan for Family Safety, which I know I have heard Senator Gallagher speak about here in this chamber previously. So I think all of us would share the priority that is explicit in your question about why more needs to be done in partnership with First Nations women to confront family violence in First Nations communities.
The time for answering has expired. Senator Waters, second supplementary.
Thanks, President. The National Cabinet announcement also failed to address the need for action on alcohol and gambling. Gambling, the financial pressure it causes, can exacerbate the risk of family violence and violence against women and children. When will the government ban TV and online gambling ads?
Minister Wong.
Thank you. I will obviously we have over the last couple of years done a lot under the guidance of Minister Rowland to tackling gambling harm. We also recognise that the status quo regarding the saturation of gambling advertising is untenable. As Minister Rowland has previously said, she is undertaking consultations with stakeholders on a proposed approach. Meanwhile, our work to date, we have delivered the most significant online wagering harm reduction initiatives in the past decade, including mandatory customer ID verification, banning the use of credit cards for online wagering, forcing online wagering companies to send monthly activity statements outlining wins and losses, introduce new evidence-based taglines in wagering advertising, providing direct funding assistance for specialist financial counselling to support people affected by problem gambling, launched Bet Stop, the National Self-Exclusion Register for problem gamblers, and many more.
Senator Sheldon. Order. We've moved on. Senator Sheldon.
My question is to the Minister for Employment and Workplace Relations, Senator Watt. After a decade of deliberate wage stagnation under the Liberals and Nationals, those opposite, Australian workers and households are feeling the strain of cost-of-living pressures. Since coming to government, the Albanese Labor government has introduced a raft of reforms designed to ease cost-of-living pressures for all Australians. I note some of these reforms have just recently started to come into effect for working Australians. Minister, how is the Albanese Labor government's workplace relations agenda supporting wages growth and recreating secure full-time work for Australians to help ease the cost of living?
Senator Watt. Minister Watt.
Thank you, President, and thank you, Senator Sheldon. And as Senator Sheldon very well knows, our #1 focus in the Albanese government is easing the cost of living pressures for all Australians. And that's why our government is helping workers earn more and keep more of what they earn. 5 seconds into the answer and they're already whinging about trying to help Australians with cost of living pressures. That tells you all you need to know about the opposition. Of course, we know that under the Albanese government, every Australian taxpayer is getting a tax cut. Every Australian household is getting a $300 energy bill relief. Under Labor, there are more people in work, there are more women in work, more people are in full-time work, and importantly, we're getting wages moving again. I know you don't like wages moving again. Thank you for reminding everyone. And we're also supporting measures to improve conditions at work. We're reducing the amount of unpaid work and burnt-out burnout that workers are experiencing through our right to disconnect, and we're ensuring a pathway to permanency for casual staff. We're seeing the highest number of employees covered by newly approved enterprise agreements in over a decade, leading to bigger pay rises and more productivity for employers. And we've backed and funded a pay rise for early educators and aged care workers. And that's because Labor governments do fight for better wages and conditions. We fight for more secure jobs and we fight for safer workplaces. And one of the ways that we've done that is by closing the loopholes that businesses have been exploiting at the cost of workers. As Senator Sheldon knows, because I was with him and Senator Sterle in Sydney only a couple of weeks ago, where members of the Transport Workers Union filed an application to close some of the loopholes they've been experiencing. And what that means is that food delivery workers, gig workers, couriers and truckies now have better conditions available to them because of our closing loopholes legislation. We're seeing flight attendants, cabin crew and mine workers get pay rises from the Albanese government's same jobs, same pay legislation. We're getting wages moving again.
Minister, the time for answering has expired. Senator Sheldon, first supplementary.
Given Mr Dutton and the coalition voted against the government's policies to protect Australian workers and get wages moving, how are the Albanese government's reforms helping Australians earn more and keep more of what they earn while relieving cost of living pressures? And why are these reforms so important?
Thank you, Senator Sheldon. Minister Watt.
Thank you. Oh, Senator Hume, we'll get to you. We'll get to you. You've been very helpful over the last couple of weeks, Senator Hume. Well, as you've heard me say before, our government is delivering on tax cuts for every taxpayer and a pay rise for 2.6 million low-paid Australians. Across the 3 annual wage review decisions, minimum wage earners are now getting an extra $143 per week. That's 2.6 million low-paid workers that are getting their 3rd consecutive pay rise, and I hear the opposition saying no. They say no to low-paid workers getting a pay rise because they say no to everything. Now compare that with those opposite, who've never once argued for a rise in the minimum wage, and of course their deliberate design feature of their economic policy was low wages. It took the coalition their entire wasted decade in office to lift the minimum wage by as much as we have in our first term. I know you hate to hear it, but when you turn up at the Fair Work Commission and you advocate for people to have a pay rise, it turns out that can happen, and that's helping them with the cost of living pressures they're experiencing.
Senator Sheldon, second supplementary.
I note that the Liberals and Nationals have repeatedly voted against the Albanese Labor government's legislation to protect workers and get wages moving, while promising that take targeted repeals of these protections to the next election to take them away. What are the key barriers to getting wages moving and delivering meaningful cost of living to all Australians? And what do Australian workers stand to lose if Mr Dutton is able to make his repeals?
Thank you, Senator Sheldon. Minister Watt.
Thanks, Senator Sheldon. Well, let's compare the pair, shall we? Labor's laws have got wages moving again. They've increased bargaining. They've introduced the right to disconnect, rights for gig workers and new rights for casual workers. We're standing alongside Australians to deliver the better pay, more secure work and safe workplaces they deserve. And meanwhile, we've seen Mr Dutton, Mr Taylor, Senator Cash, sometimes Senator Birmingham when he bothers, and other members of the coalition say that if they're elected to office, they will scrap a whole range of these rights and more. They are on the record saying they will scrap the right to disconnect, they will scrap the rights for casuals, and they will make more targeted repeals. Now, if you wanted to understand why, just look at some of the comments from Senator Hume while we've been away. On the day we introduced the right to disconnect, Senator Hume was in the media saying, quote, adding rights, more rights for workers for something that is just part of a normal working relationship is unreasonable. Senator Hume and the coalition think that more rights for workers are unreasonable.
Minister. The time
well, we
for
don't.
answering has expired. Senator Roberts.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Climate Change and Energy, Senator McAllister. For every 100 megawatts of installed coal-fired power station capacity, the production of electricity averages around 95 to 98 megawatts. For every 100 megawatts of installed solar and wind generation capacity, though, the actual production of electricity averages just 23 megawatts, with wind itself being just 21. This means that to achieve design capacity, more than 4 times the installed rated capacity is required, almost 5 times for wind. Minister, is this included in Labor's transition costs?
Thank you, Senator Roberts. Minister McAllister.
Thanks very much for the question, Senator Roberts. And, Senator, in terms of costings, we take the advice of the experts. So we've had this conversation more than once, in fact, in the context of estimates and in other forums. AEMO works through a range of scenarios and configurations for the national electricity market and makes an assessment about the optimal pathway to meet our energy requirements at the optimal cost. And they do consider, of course, the capacity factors of the different options that are available to us. There's actually quite a lot of work to do. You know, the truth is that we inherited a mess in the energy system. You know, the average wholesale energy price when we came in was $286 a megawatt hour.
Minister McAllister, please resume your seat. Senator Roberts.
Point of order in relevance. Standing Order 72.3c says that answers shall be directly relevant to each question. Can we get on to the whether or not Labor is aware
Senator Roberts, as I've reminded other senators in this place, make your point of order but don't follow it up with a statement. The minister is being directly relevant to the points of your question. Minister McAllister, please continue.
Thanks, President. Look, as I was saying, we came to government with a lot of work to do because the previous government had 22 energy policies. All of them failed. None of them landed. And during the period they were in government, 4 gigawatts of a dispatchable capacity left the system and only 1 came on. And we actually need to take steps to sort that out, because the previous government were repeatedly warned by the market operator that a failure to deal with the impending closure of coal-fired power stations was going to cause a reliability problem. And we have sought advice from the experts at the market operator to help us design the policy settings that will actually allow us to replace that exiting capacity. It's a lot more than anything that was ever delivered by the people opposite. And the very great shame is, Senator Roberts, that for a person who I know seeks to represent people in Queensland, you show an odd lack of interest in the opportunities that come about as a consequence of making and facilitating these investments, because it has the potential to bring jobs and new industry to the communities that you claim to care about.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Roberts, first supplementary.
Thank you. During morning and evening peak hours, for every 100 megawatts of installed solar and wind generation capacity, the actual production of electricity averages just 10 megawatts. This means achieving design capacity requires 10 times the installed rated capacity. Minister, what impact does this massive additional cost have on solar and wind installation capital costs and on electricity prices?
Thank you, Senator Roberts. Minister McAllister.
Thanks very much, President. Well, Senator, your question actually omits a really important part of the advice that we receive from the market operator. So the advice that we receive, and it's based on very significant economic modelling and engagement with a whole range of market participants and experts in the energy system, is that the optimal configuration of technology for a future grid involves renewables, firmed by storage, including batteries, and supplemented by gas. And that's the plan that has been recommended to us, and the policy settings that we've put in place are designed to allow investment in those kinds of technologies to be brought forward. Now, as I indicated in my answer to your primary question, there is a problem, because there was an extended period where the lack of certainty in the policy settings of the previous government meant that the necessary investment didn't take place, and we are taking steps to remedy that problem.
Senator Roberts, second supplementary.
Thank you. A modern coal-fired power station is expected to last 60 years. Solar panels and wind turbines are expected to last 12 to 15 years, at most 20. Over the 60-year life of a coal-fired power plant, the combination of wind and solar cobbled together to replace a single coal plant will need to be replaced 4 times. Minister, when will Labor release its system cost of the 2050 grid? System.
Thank you, Senator Roberts. Minister McAllister.
Well, as the senator would know, if he examined the integrated system plan, it does include a costing for the capital costs associated with building the grid out to 2050. So the answer is it is released and updated on a regular basis by way of the integrated system plan, because that's the basis on which we establish our policies to deal with the transition that's underway in the electricity system. And the truth is that it is underway, Senator Roberts. I know that that is a proposition you don't agree with, but in just 2 years we've seen a 25% increase in our national grid in the cheapest and cleanest form of energy that there is, which is reliable renewables. And we've ticked off enough reliable renewables projects to power 3 million homes. And those things matter. Establishing a clear pathway for the electricity supply that's necessary to meet the needs of households and businesses is an absolute priority for this government and should be for every other government.
The time
as
for
well.
answering has expired. Senator Duniam.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for the Environment, Senator McAllister. In relation to Minister Plibersek's Indigenous Cultural Heritage decision against the McPhillamys gold mine, she said on the 28th of August that, and I quote, "The tailings dam can't be built on the headwaters of a river. Once you destroy this river, it is destroyed forever." If this is true, then why did the Minister and her department approve the project on environmental grounds in the EPBC Act assessment that was completed last year?
Thank you, Senator Duniam. Minister McAllister.
Thanks, President, and thanks, Senator Duniam, for the question. Senator, I think that Minister Plibersek has made it clear repeatedly in statements to the parliament, in statements publicly, that she acted on the evidence before her and followed the advice and recommendation of her department, consistent with the law. So I don't think it assists our understanding to take a single comment that is made in a media interview because it overlooks the balance of information that Ms Plibersek has put into the public domain about how and why this decision was taken. The truth is that the decision protects around 400 hectares of a 2,500 hectare site, 16% of that site, and the company now has an opportunity to find a more appropriate site for the tailings dam, one that avoids cultural heritage impacts. If they do so, the mine can proceed, and the Minister and I, everyone in the government, welcomes the news that they are working with the New South Wales government to do exactly that. The department that Ms Plibersek administers stands ready, of course, to look at other options that the company proposes to ensure that any assessment that might be required can happen quickly. And, of course, that willingness reflects the investments and the capacity to do so reflects the investments that the government has made to improve on-time approvals rates. Some projects recently ticked off within 9 weeks. So I think Senator Duniam, the Minister has made very clear that she's acted consistent with the law. She took advice from the department and she considered the evidence that was before her.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Duniam, first supplementary.
Thank you, President. I'm not sure I agree with what was just said, but on the 1st of September this year, reinforcing the findings of their extensive assessments of the area, the New South Wales EPA said, and I quote, "Environmental risks to receiving waters are minimal and can effectively be managed with standard practices and relevant licensing conditions." When will this minister concede that her claim about destruction of the river was entirely false?
Thank you, Senator Duniam. Minister McAllister.
Thanks very much, President. Well, Senator Duniam, your question doesn't really follow from the information I've already provided to you. The basis of the decision that Minister Plibersek made is—
Order. 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 Please continue, Minister.
Thanks, President. Minister Plibersek's been very clear about the basis on which she made this decision. An application was put before her under the Act for protection on the grounds of cultural heritage. As a consequence of that, she took evidence from a range of parties, she sought advice from her department, and she made a decision to partially protect some of the site. And the truth is that protecting cultural heritage and economic development aren't mutually exclusive, and they must not be. We can actually do both. And that was a proposition that only a few months ago the coalition agreed with.
Has expired. Senator Duniam, second supplementary.
President, on the 28th of August, New South Wales Premier Chris Minns said that the State Independent Planning Commission's decision to allow the McPhillamys gold mine project to proceed was comprehensive and that it was also based significantly on the advice of the Orange Aboriginal Land Council and, under those circumstances, he said, I think the correct judgment was made. Given the Environment Minister has taken completely the opposite position, can she explain how the IPC, the Orange Land Council and the Premier of New South Wales, Labor's Chris Minns, have managed to get this so very wrong?
Thank you, Senator Duniam. Minister McAllister.
All right.
Thank you, President.
Order, Senator Cash. Order. Minister, please.
I'm asked about comments made by the Premier of New South Wales, and really it is up to the New South Wales Government to explain their processes and the application of their laws to this particular project. Minister Plibersek's obligations are different to the New South Wales Minister. She is responsible for applying federal law and to responding to applications that are made to her under federal law.
Order.
And as I have previously explained to this chamber and to you, Senator Duniam, she takes that process very seriously. The minister's responsibility is to consider the evidence, to weigh it, to consider its relevance to the law and to make legally sound decisions, and that is the approach she has taken in this instance also.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Hodgkins-May.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing Early Childhood Education, Minister Watt. Minister, early education is a fundamental right. Yet across the country, 700,000 people live in childcare deserts, according to research published by Victoria University. That's 1 in 4 people who have no access to early childhood education and care because of where they live. It's unacceptable that in a wealthy country like ours, access to childcare continues to be determined by your postcode. I've been hearing from parents in communities across Victoria whose kids are on multiple waiting lists and who are missing out on an early education because they can't secure childcare. Minister, what concrete steps has the government taken to specifically address the issue of childcare deserts in Australia?
Thank you, Senator Hodgkins-May. Minister Watt.
Thank you, President, and thank you, Senator Bilyk, for your interjection there, because I know, Senator Bilyk, that you've got probably more experience working in the early childhood education and care sector than anyone in this chamber. So, thank you for that interjection, Senator Bilyk. Senator, in answer to your question, as I think I've pointed out before, the Albanese government is investing probably more than any government in Australia's history in early childhood education and care. Now, I know it may not be enough for your satisfaction, and we know that whatever Labor does, the Greens will always demand more. That's the business model of the Greens. We understand that. But it's an undeniable fact that the Albanese government has delivered a significant pay rise for early childhood education and care workers, a pay rise that was desperately deserved by those workers. We know that one of the key impediments to getting people to work in the sector or remain in the sector has been low pay. And I'm not sure about you, Senator, but certainly the centres that I've been to over the last few weeks since that pay rise was awarded, I've literally met the early childhood education and care workers who are telling us that not only are they intending now to stay in the sector as a result of this pay rise, but that they're also being contacted by their friends who had left the sector because of the low pay and they're seeking to come back. So, of course, having the workforce available is a key point in making sure that Australians can obtain the care that they're seeking for their children in the way that you're seeking. We're obviously doing a lot more than that, though, around reducing childcare fees and investing in the sector in a much broader range of ways than has ever been done before.
Minister, please resume your seat. Senator Hodgkins-May.
Thank you, President. I'd just like to draw the minister's attention to the question, which was talking about childcare deserts rather than existing childcare.
The minister is addressing your question, Senator. Minister, please continue.
Well, Senator, I'd be surprised if you would be arguing that paying workers a fair wage is not part of the solution to childcare deserts. We know that there haven't been enough childcare and early childhood education and care services available.
Minister. The time for answering has expired.
That's
Senator Hodgkins-May, first supplementary.
Yeah, sorry, it's Hodgins, not Hodgkins. Early education and care in Australia is a system in crisis. Rural, remote and regional towns in particular are suffering, where the acute lack of childcare is hurting families, contributing to financial stress and impacting parents' mental health. It is clear that market forces alone will not create equal education outcomes or allow more women to participate in the workforce. Minister, will the government commit to providing supply-side subsidies for childcare providers to tackle childcare deserts?
Thank you. Minister Watt.
Well, we are. We are doing that, particularly when it comes to regional Australia. The truth is that we did inherit a system that wasn't responding to the needs of regional and rural families when it comes to early childhood education and care. And through the Community Childcare Fund, round 4, we're providing around $80 million to over 430 early childhood education and care services, supporting disadvantaged and vulnerable communities, including in regional and rural areas. Our reforms to cheaper childcare are also making early learning cheaper for over 1 million families, including 265,000 families in regional Australia. So whether it be the funding that we're providing to centres through the Community Childcare Fund, whether it be paying workers in the sector the wage they deserve, that makes it more attractive for them to stay in the sector, or by providing greater fee relief for Australian families who need childcare services, we are doing everything we can and we will keep investing to fix the problem.
Senator Hodgkins-May, second supplementary.
A report out today by the Parenthood found that a staggering 86% of regional, rural and remote parents who are struggling to access childcare say it's causing them significant financial stress. Parents feel broken by the stress of searching and waiting for childcare spots. While their kids miss out on crucial early years education, they continue to miss out on much-needed paid work. Minister, we are in a cost of living crisis. Why then won't Labor listen to parents and families and finally deliver on making childcare free and universally accessible for all families?
Thank you, Senator. Minister Watt.
Well, again, Senator Hodgins-May, unlike the Greens, the Labor Party is actually delivering the early childhood education, care and services that so many families in regional and rural Australia are seeking. We're not just interested in coming in here and making complaints, or we're not just interested in grandstanding or jumping up on stage with the CFMEU, as we know the Greens like to do. What we're actually about doing is delivering the services that Australian families need. We acknowledge that there's a long way to go, because we did inherit a system that was fundamentally broken by the Coalition, despite their claims to be the party representing rural and regional Australia. And that's why we are now, through the Community Childcare Fund, investing more in services, why we're delivering the pay rise that workers in the sector need. We're reducing the fees to be charged. Oh, it's the head of the sector faction of the Greens over there, Senator Shoebridge, chipping in. We are doing what the Greens can only complain about and can grandstand about. We're actually getting it done. We're interested in results.
The time for answering has expired. Senator Pratt.
President, my question is for the Minister for Indigenous Australians, Senator McCarthy. On the 29th of August, the Minister released an independent report into the Anandiliaqua Land Council's progress towards addressing issues raised in a performance audit conducted by the Australian National Audit Office. Can the Minister please explain what action has been taken to improve governance arrangements for the Anandiliaqua Land Council?
Thank you, Senator Pratt. Minister McCarthy.
Thank you, President. Thank you, Senator Pratt, for your question. Yes, last year the Australian National Audit Office, the ANAO, conducted a performance audit of the Anandiliaqua Land Council, and this report
is to be tabled in Parliament. In late August, I received the independent report on the Anadolu Land Council's progress in addressing recommendations made by the ANAO. The report shows the ALC governance and operations remain deficient, although the ALC's board have acknowledged these findings and remain committed to implementation. Their lack of progress is unacceptable. In response to the independent review findings, I took several steps immediately after receiving the report. I wrote to the ALC board on the 29th of August to ensure the board and voters were aware of the review's findings ahead of ALC board elections, which took place on the 3rd of September. I've taken the unusual decision to withhold approval for the ALC's 2024-25 budget. Instead, I have approved an operational budget until the 1st of December this year. The full budget will only be considered when ALC has demonstrated it is sufficiently prioritising and implementing the recommendations of the ANAO report. I have asked the NIAA Integrity Unit and the new ALC board to meet as soon as practicable after the election results are finalised to discuss the review and the board's role in implementing ANAO recommendations. I've made sure, President, the full independent review report is available on the NIAA website to ensure transparency of the review, its findings and recommendations, particularly in the lead-up to the ALC elections.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Pratt, first supplementary.
Minister, for your response to the issues raised in the independent report. I'm pleased to hear of the prompt action you've taken to ensure that Anadolu Land Council is moving to implement the recommendations of the ANA report and to improve governance and performance so it can best support the traditional owners it represents.
Order.
So in that context, please, Minister, can you share with us what is being done to strengthen governance arrangements for this and other land councils?
Thank you, Senator Pratt. Order. Order. Senator McKenzie and other senators, I'm in charge of the time, not you. Minister McCarthy.
Thank you, President. Good to see they're awake over there.
That's right, finally.
I take Land Council governance very seriously, President, and for those who are calling for an audit of land councils, I do remind the Senate, in particular in the Northern Territory, that last year there wasn't just one audit, there were four. 4 audits of land councils by the Australian National Audit Office. Well, I'll pick up on that interjection.
Order.
I'll pick up on that interjection. And more than happy to provide that briefing for you, Senator Little, as I did for the Greens and for Senator Pocock. But the Attorney-General, Mark Dreyfus, has referred to the Australian Law Reform Commission that very matter. So you are very welcome, Senator Little. You're very welcome to attend that and be briefed on what the Australian Law Reform Commission is doing, and I'm more than happy to arrange that for you.
Senator Pratt, second supplementary.
Thank you, Minister, for confirming the government's commitment to land councils operating with integrity. The integrity of land councils is critical to a well-functioning land rights and native title system. Can the minister please explain on why land council governance is so important and what you are doing to support it?
Thank you, Senator Pratt. Minister McCarthy.
Thank you, President, and I do appreciate the questions from Senator Pratt. We all know that without good governance, land councils cannot deliver on their purpose, and there are areas where their governance can be improved, which is why I've told the Senate what has happened with the Anadolu Land Council. However, we know exactly where these areas are because they are reviewed regularly. And as I've said, we have 4 audits into the NT land councils, Senator Little, that are currently being implemented, which make specific recommendations for change.
Senator Little, may I invite you to make a contribution at some other time, not during question time? Minister McCarthy, please continue.
I'll be interested to hear that contribution, President. And for the benefit of Senator Little in particular, you are more than welcome to receive the briefing both on the native title work that's being done by the Australian Law Reform Commission with the Attorney-General and also with the audits that are being done with the land councils.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Cash.
Thank you. And my question is to the Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Wong. CFMEU National Secretary Zack Smith, whom the Albanese government refused to sack from the CFMEU, despite overseeing an appalling culture of law-breaking, recently said in a letter to CFMEU members that, and I quote, "Politicians who have never stepped onto a construction site have overwhelmingly stripped away our union's democracy. You are right to be angry about what has happened. I'm angry about what has happened. I will continue to lead this union, serve the members and put your best interests forward. I will not be silent." So, Minister, who is actually running the CFMEU at the moment? Is it the Administrator, Mark Irving? Is it John Setka, who keeps on turning up on government building sites to address CFMEU members? Or is it Mr Smith, who has emphatically and publicly told members that he is still in charge?
Thank you, Senator Cash. Minister Wong.
Thank you. Well, the short answer is the Administrator is running the union. The Administrator is running the union, and what I would say to you, Senator Cash, and I know I note how much you wish to yell about this. I note you've always wanted to yell about it, and you've actually done so little ever to actually improve governance inside the union. And can I remind senators why it is that this government took the strongest action that was available to us in relation to the CFMEU? It's because we believe that trade unionism matters to Australians, it matters to workers, and we do not believe that corruption and violence and thuggery belong in the trade union movement. That is why we have done this. And we have done this despite your opposition, and we have done it despite those at the other end of the chamber, the Greens who call themselves progressive, who have aligned themselves with corruption, thuggery and violence in the trade union movement. Now, we on this side understand the importance of the trade union movement.
Minister Wong, order. Order. Senator Cash, I've called your name at least 6 times. You are being incredibly disrespectful towards me. Senator McGrath, equally. You are required to listen in silence. You've asked your question. The minister is responding. Minister Wong, please continue.
You did nothing for 10 years. We put them into administration. Let's be clear.
Order. 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 Senator Cash, I'm just wondering when you and the rest of the senators on my left are going to come to order. I've just called you to order, and the minute the minister got back up on her feet, there was disorder. You are being disrespectful to the orders that I am requiring you to adhere to. Minister Wong.
Thank you, President. I would remind Senator Cash and those opposite that the Administrator has the power to terminate or suspend officials inside the CFMEU. So I know that doesn't suit Senator Cash's political objective, but the Administrator has the power to terminate or suspend officials of the union. So that is the answer to your question, Senator Cash. And I know, Senator Cash, that it doesn't suit your political agenda for me to continue to assert that fact. For that fact to be true, the Administrator has the power, and the Administrator is running the union. What I would say to Senator Cash again—
thank you, Minister. The time for answering has expired. Senator Cash, before I call you for your first supplementary, I have asked and asked and asked for you to come to order, and you've completely ignored me. I know you're on your feet, Senator Polley, but I have the floor at the moment, so please sit down. I'll come to you. So, Senator Cash, I'm asking you, once you've asked your question, to sit and listen in respectful silence. Senator Polley.
Just on point of order, I would like Senator Brockman to withdraw his slur that he made during the last little tete-on-tete that they were having, and I ask you to ask him to withdraw.
Senator Brockman. Order. Order. You may not have noticed, but Senator Brockman was on his feet. Senator Brockman, I didn't hear it. So
Sure what they're concerned about either, but I'm happy to withdraw.
thank you, Senator Brockman. Senator Cash, I am going to ask you to ask your first supplementary. Senator Ayres. And then I'm going to ask you to listen in silence. Senator Cash.
Thank you. And how is the CFMEU's administrator supposed to do his job, given that Mr Smith is telling his members that he's still in charge? Will you, Minister, take the opportunity on behalf of the Albanese Labor government to condemn Mr Zack Smith for undermining the administrator?
I'm waiting for silence before I call Minister Wong. Minister.
The administrator is in charge, and the only person who's giving a platform for some of the comments is Senator Cash.
That's right.
And I would make this point. Senator Cash in the primary was yelling a lot about Mr Setka. I would remind Senator Cash that it was under her and the government she was a part of that Mr Setka's power grew, that the corruption and the thuggery and the violence grew. Under the coalition, whilst the ABCC was in place, and also while Senator Cash was the relevant minister. So we have taken stronger action than you were ever able or willing to take. And you know why we have done it? Not as you wish to do, which is to seek to break the trade union movement, but because we want a trade union movement that is stronger and grounded in the values of the labour movement, and corruption and violence are not grounded in the values of the trade union movement.
Senator Cash, second supplementary.
Mr Smith also told CFMEU members in his public letter that, and I quote, "As long as you stick by tough militant trade unionism, this is not the end of our union. As always, the CFMEU is here to stay." Isn't it clear that numerous CFMEU officials, like Mr Smith, are not committed to changing the CFMEU's appalling culture? What action is the government going to take against Mr Smith?
Thank you, Senator Cash. Minister Wong.
Well, again, I remind Senator Cash the only person giving a platform to the comments that she is quoting is Senator Cash. I would remind Senator Cash that the administrator is in charge. I know she might not like that, but the administrator is in charge.
Minister Wong, please resume your seat. Minister Wong, please continue.
The administrator is in charge, and the administrator has the power to terminate or suspend union officials, and to date has terminated or suspended nearly 20 officials.
There you go.
So that is a far more stringent set of actions that are taken under the administration that has been put in place by this government than ever occurred, despite all of the protestations that those opposite, in particular Senator Cash, with police raids and other things, was involved in. So what I would say to you, Senator Cash, is you should back the administrator. We back the administrator, and we do so for the principled reasons we have outlined. And, President, I ask that further questions be placed on notice.